The Boarded Window by Ambrose Bierce. In 1830, only a few miles away from what is now the great city of Cincinnati, lay an immense and almost unbroken forest. The whole region was sparsely settled by people of the frontier, restless souls who, with the first evidence of neighborhood, pushed ever farther into the wilderness, seeking greater solitude. One such was a man named Murlock. He lived alone in a house of logs, surrounded on all sides by the great forest, of whose gloom and silence he seemed part, for no one had ever known him to smile or speak a needless word. His simple wants were supplied by the sale or barter of skins of wild animals in the town, for not a farmer was within miles of his clearing. He seemed not so much a recluse as a man who had been deprived of his natural place in life by some unfathomable sorrow. His simple, lonely home had an air of mystery, and when he died, years after, people clearing away the ruins of his cabin found a boarded-up window, a strange thing indeed in a log house, and they found something more. One day, Murlock was found in his cabin, dead. His body was in a chair at the table where he had always eaten, and before him lay a half-written piece of paper. He had apparently died without finishing it. The writing was ill-formed and scarcely legible, a man unused to the pen having essayed to set down the history of his life. The first part of the manuscript was an account of how he had settled in the wilderness and how he had married a woman whom he loved with all his heart, though she was, it seems, of a different race from him. The account of his life had been written slowly, with many erasures and corrections. One night, his wife fell ill and died suddenly. Overcome with sorrow, he prepared the body for burial. The only window of the cabin was boarded up, the darkness of the room lit only by a single candle. After performing the last offices for his dead, he sat in a chair beside the body and, exhausted, fell asleep. Hours later, he awoke suddenly, feeling an unaccountable dread. The candle had burned low, flickering in its socket, casting weird shadows on the walls. At first, he did not know what had disturbed him, but as he listened, he heard a low, savage sound, a sound unlike anything he had ever heard before. The noise seemed to be near the table where his wife's body lay. He was paralyzed with fear, unable to move or cry out. He felt the sweat forming on his forehead as he struggled against the terror that held him. Then suddenly, he sprang to his feet and, blindly groping for his rifle, fired at the darkness. The report of the weapon stunned him, and for a time, he knew nothing more. When he recovered his senses, the candle was out. The place was utterly dark. Something wet was running down his face, and something warm was trickling down his breast. With trembling hands, he struck a light. The scene before him was ghastly. The body of his wife was gone. The cabin door stood open. Blood was everywhere. Falling to his knees, he saw, just outside the threshold, the lifeless body of his wife, and clutched in her rigid fingers was a handful of coarse, black fur. A panther had entered the house. She had not been dead when he fell asleep, and that is why, long afterward, the window of that house remained forever boarded up.